Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we'll be answering a question from our audience on: can you discuss the potential consequences or outcomes of a declining empire reaching the point of revolutions and civil war? And really, I want to go over here the potential outcomes of the decline of America. And so the first one, and this is the most optimistic one, I don't think this is particularly likely, is a peaceful resolution. The country stays together as a consistent whole, a unified whole, and they figure out some way of resolving their conflicts. The reason I don't think this is likely is because of the fact that they factionalize so much that you're seeing evidence that there's really nothing that can bring them together. You see, typically during a time of a pandemic, an epidemic within a country, people will come together and they actually become more conservative and they become more hostile towards external nations. They become more hostile towards threats. And we've seen that throughout really every pandemic in history. But the thing is, in America and in a lot of Western societies during the pandemic, you actually saw the opposite happening, where two camps formed and they rallied around each other, where they were very hostile, very antagonistic towards each other. And so instead of having a nation come together against external threats during a pandemic, you actually had people rally around their own clan or group, and instead of fighting external threats, they ended up attacking each other, the other group within society. And so I see it as extremely unlikely for a peaceful resolution that leads to a unified United States at the end. The next potential outcome or consequence of the decline of America is a national divorce. And it's actually really shocking, very scary to think about, but I've even heard people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congressperson, talk about a national divorce. And so you're having people within our government, within the legislative branch of the American government, talking about the peaceful splitting up of the nation, or mostly peaceful splitting up of the nation, we hope. And for the longest time, we thought that would be extremely unlikely. I would actually say it's becoming more and more likely because of the fact that you're seeing people more and more willing to move to various parts of the country that align more with their beliefs. And you're seeing a lot of people who are conservative or more centrist moving to places like Texas and Florida from places like California. And so you're seeing actual, tangible geographic boundaries between people of different beliefs. And you didn't have that as much because people used to go where the jobs were. And with things like remote work becoming more prominent, you're seeing people splitting up more and more. Now, there is some interesting elements in that most of the major cities and most of the capitals of various states typically are left-leaning, are Democratic-leaning, while most of the rural areas and even a lot of the suburban areas of states are typically right-leaning or conservative-leaning, or I guess you could even say Republican-leaning. And so it's hard to say because you're seeing the split is likely, if it happens, would likely occur not between states, but within states, where the capitals would be a part of one new nation, and then the rest of the state would mostly be a part of another new nation. But the problem is that really wouldn't work out, because if these two new countries are very hostile towards each other, the nation with a lot of land, which would be the more conservative part of the nation, would have access to all the resources. They would also have access to all the transportation, aside from by air, to these various cities. And so it's hard to see how the cities would survive without having the surrounding territory. So you're going to have to see at least some of the cities if you have a national divorce, which I also don't think is particularly likely, but you'd have to see some of the cities being conceded to right-leaning people, while some of the rural areas in places like California would have to be ceded to the Democratic-controlled new country that is formed. And so there's some difficulties there, even with people splitting up, just because of the fact that there's not clear borders. because both sides are going to want to have access to the sea. Both sides are going to want to have a consistent whole border. They're not going to want to have like little city-states within some other country. And so there's a lot of technical problems with a national divorce, but it's not entirely possible. You can see an example of Yugoslavia where the borders weren't particularly clear at the beginning when Yugoslavia fragmented, but people ended up moving to areas that were like Bosnian or Croatian or Serbian, etc., based off of just where the borders ended up falling at the end of that conflict. And so you might see something similar in a national divorce in the United States, where just maybe the conservative areas of California have to be ceded, but then the more liberal areas of Texas have to be ceded as well, so that you could have the entire state or most of the state be given to one of the new nations. But this is a completely hypothetical scenario if a national divorce ended up occurring. The next potential outcome of a declining empire is a low intensity of violence. And this, I think, has a decent likelihood of occurring, and that is where you just have a lot of major problems occurring. You have something like the troubles, the difficulties in Northern Ireland, where you'll just have bombings, you'll have assassinations, things like that. And you're already starting to see it, where you're having just mass shootings occurring, where they have a lot of political elements to it, or you're seeing people being run over for being white, etc. And so this low intensity violence, where it's not like two sides forming large groups and going to battle, but you're just seeing either lone wolves or small cells of people committing acts of major violence. That type of low intensity conflict that's not really a full civil war has, I would say, a pretty decent likelihood of occurring. And you can almost, I think you can make a pretty clear case that it's already occurring in the United States. And the final thing, can you discuss the potential consequences or outcomes of a declining empire reaching the point of revolutions and civil wars? This, I'm iffy on if this is that likely to occur. I think the most likely scenario is low intensity violence. But this probably has roughly equivalent likelihood of occurring as a national divorce, and that is that a revolution and civil war ends up occurring in the United States. I would say part of my reason for thinking that this is unlikely to occur is because of the fact that people are living very sedentary lives right now. So even if they have a lot of guns, they're not particularly likely to use them against other people, because that's difficult. It's a lot of work. We kind of saw this with the January 6th thing, where you had a lot of what were mostly baby boomers who I can imagine they owned more guns than their body weight, which is very impressive, and yet they didn't bring those guns to the Capitol. And so you're seeing people who are very angry, very upset with the state of affairs of America, to the point where they would riot in the Capitol like that. They would protest in the Capitol like that, depending on how you view the event. But they're not actually bringing guns. They're not actually committing atrocities, committing violence. And so I am very skeptical. Even if food prices go up, even if people lose their various distractions, their various sources of entertainment, I'm very skeptical of the population actually resorting to actual large grouped armed conflicts with actual battles. And so hopefully my explanation here makes it clear why I think a low intensity violent conflict is the most likely to occur, similar to the Troubles in Ireland. Obviously, we would love for a peaceful resolution to occur. Nonviolence is excellent. It's the answer whenever possible. But right now, my brain, the predictive algorithm within it, is saying a low intensity violent conflict is likely to occur at least for the next decade in America, and likely longer until things are resolved in one way, shape, or form in the country. So if you thought what I just said was insightful in one way, shape, or form, in some way, shape, or form, please like this video. And if you want to hear more content from me, please subscribe to our channel. I also read every comment in the comment box, and I will respond whenever necessary, and I might even make a video on it if it's something that requires a video. So please comment with any comments, questions, concerns, critiques you might have. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.